Well, let me say thank you all for coming. I haven't actually looked out the windows yet for the last couple of hours, so I have no idea if it's clearing up beautifully or clouding up beautifully, whichever way it's going. So hopefully we'll have some really amazing things to see tonight. But I want to thank you all for bringing me down here. My name is Tyler Nordgren. I'm a professor of astronomy at the University of Redlands, which is actually in Southern California. I'm right outside Los Angeles, perhaps one of the worst places in the country to actually see the stars. Right now I'm on sabbatical at Cornell University. I'm there writing a book about solar eclipses in preparation for the 2017 solar eclipse. It's going to actually be somewhere down these parts down in North Carolina, South Carolina. So you folks all have a fantastic opportunity to see something pretty amazing coming up here in a few years. But the thing we're going to talk about today is really the night sky and the national parks. I've been doing a lot of work with national parks for about the last 8 years. Soon after getting tenure back in 2005, I had a sabbatical coming up, my first sabbatical. And I decided, well, normally for those of us that teach at smaller or arts colleges, you get a sabbatical and you go off for a year and you write a whole bunch of papers because you never get a chance to do that while you're actually teaching classes. But I happened to go and celebrate my newfound tenure by going up to Yosemite National Park and camping. And while I was up there, went to the Evening Ranger program. And it was a ranger from Rice Canyon who was coming out, teaching the Yosemite Rangers about the night sky. And so we were in this great big outdoor amphitheater. And he began to give this talk about all the amazing things you can see in national parks. And I loved that. I knew that stuff. So I knew why I was there. But I looked around, there were 90 other people in this amphitheater. And they were oohing and awing as this ranger was talking. And I realized that there was something really profound going on here. For most of those people, this was the first time they'd actually ever been outside under a truly dark sky. As it got dark, as the program went on and it finally got fully dark, you could actually see the Milky Way overhead. People were oohing and awing about that. I realized, once again, most people do not see the Milky Way on a regular basis. Current estimates are that for US and European populations, 60% of those populations can no longer even faintly see the Milky Way from where they live. So let's see a show of hands. How many folks here can actually see the Milky Way from where you live? Okay. Wow, pretty good fraction. But then again, you're all astronomers. So maybe it's, we've got an observational bias going on here, if not at least amateur astronomers. There's in fact, you have got some interest in this. When I talk to my students and I ask them if they've ever seen the Milky Way, I'll get 2 hands go up. And I'll ask them where they saw it, and they'll say, the Grand Canyon, or Yosemite. It's a national park. So that's one of the things that has really become an eye-opening experience with the national parks over these last 8 years that I've been working with them, is the degree to which knowledge about how the national parks have become a place to see the sky has really begun to make its way through the park system. So here's me at the start of my sabbatical. I went and spent an entire calendar year, 14 months, traveling through the national parks. I started with what used to be my hometown park, Denali. Went to high school up in Alaska. Went up to Denali, 4th of July, never saw the stars, never got dark. The sun at the most was 5 degrees below the northern horizon at midnight. But it does capture one of the aspects for why the national parks become such a fantastic place to see the stars, even if it's not on that day. Glacier National Park. The fact that the last 100 or more years, in fact in 2016 the National Park Service will be celebrating its centennial. So for the last 100 plus years, these parks have been preserving the landscape. You see in these photographs, there's no car dealerships, there's no condos, no banks, no gas stations. Right? So you have this lack of development in these large, relatively large geographical areas. And so as a result, when the sun goes down, for those photographers that actually do stay out after the sun goes down, you get the stars coming out. And for most folks, any average night in a national park, they're going to see more stars than they probably see at home. And if you've been really lucky, and you happen to be there on a moonless night, and a night where you've got the Milky Way out, you get to see the Milky Way overhead. weren't fully dark adapted. When I take my students, in fact, here are my students out of Joshua Tree. We had just gotten out of the van. Probably hadn't been there just long enough to put up our tents. We'd been using our flashlights, so none of us were truly dark adapted. But even so, we were able to lean back, look up, and all of them saw the Milky Way, a more glorious spectacle than they'd ever seen before. And the parks have caught on to that. When I first started this project back in 2007, I could go to some parks and the superintendent or the rangers would tell me, why are you here? What does my park have to do with the night sky? The night sky has nothing to do with arches, for instance. And so there was actually a bit of a hostility when it came to the night sky in the parks. But really, over the last 5 years, there's been a tremendous change. I no longer encounter that view. This has also coincided with a rise in night sky festivals that have taken place in parks. There are some parks, Bryce Canyon, Grand Canyon, that have been doing night sky festivals for about a decade or more. In some places, it's simply the local astronomy club would come up, set up their telescopes, and invite people to come and take a look. But Bryce Canyon, for instance, has been doing this probably the longest of many of the national parks. About 10 years ago, really put some effort into this. So it's a multi-day affair. They have multiple speakers at night. They have shuttle buses taking people from the speakers out to the telescope field, where they'll have the telescope set up by the local astronomy club, in this case, Salt Lake City. They'll have activities during the day to show people how to use planispheres. They started doing rocket launches, build your own rockets, scale model solar system walks. So really, it's become a day and night feature for the crowd, for the visitors. And they're actually beginning to see tremendous results from this. These have become the most heavily attended functions that these parks do over the course of a year. One example I really love is Acadia National Park. This year was their 6th annual one. When I was first up there in 2007, they were just in the process of passing a local lighting ordinance in Bar Harbor, the gateway town right outside the park. I've come back for 1 or 2 festivals, and I was able to be a keynote speaker for this one. And one of the things they've seen is they hold this festival during the time of year which is normally a downtime for tourism. You've got the big summer season, everyone comes up. Then you've got the fall leaf picking season, everyone comes out for. But right kind of in between is sort of a lull, and it's really hurt the local merchants. That's when they hold their night sky festival, so it's usually early in September. And what they have seen is that in each of the 6 years, the number of people who have attended has just risen. The number of beds that are sold in the hotels and the inns has risen. They have now found this to be incredibly popular. The majority of people that come to their programs are people that specifically came from out of state in order to see this program. They aren't just folks who casually happen to be here anyway. Also, the local Chamber of Commerce has now really become the ones that are driving this. It's no longer just the park. So it's actually the local businesses who recognize that this is an added event for them. It is bringing business to their park, into their towns. So just to talk a little bit about, what is it when people do see the Milky Way? When you come to some place like Acadia or Bryce Canyon, or when you come here, you look up and you see that Milky Way. All right, so what is it we're actually showing the visitors? Well, we're showing the visitors, of course, our home galaxy. Giant pinwheel of 100 billion stars out in space. We locate out here in the outskirts. You flip that on its side, if you could, you can step outside and take a look. Pretty thin. Typically, at a quarter is a good representation of the stellar disk of the galaxy. You take a look at an image of another spiral galaxy, you can see 891. You see all the stars there, but you also see those wonderful dark dust lanes right down through the middle. And of course, if you get yourself someplace dark, truly dark enough to see the Milky Way, not just faintly overhead, but down to the horizon, then typically you're someplace dark enough to see those same dark dust lanes here on Earth. And it's amazing to be able to show these to people. because even in places where most people can get out to see the Milky Way, at best what you're seeing is maybe this little bit up here in Cygnus, or maybe this little bit down here in Sagittarius, and they don't get to see all that other faint, neat stuff. That faint, neat stuff is profoundly important. John Muir said that back turn of the last century, when Yosemite Valley was under consideration to be made into a national park, Muir said that it was important to preserve these last remaining beautiful locations, pristine places, from the encroachment of industrialization, because in a sense you were preserving some remnants, some memory of the Garden of Eden. And it was a place that we all came from and would draw sustenance by going back and seeing. When you get to see these dark dust lanes, you are seeing a scientific Garden of Eden. It is from those dark dust clouds that we all came. In the hearts of those clouds that are so thick that they are being backlit by the stars behind them, no light is really able to penetrate inside those clouds. So they become some of the darkest places in the galaxy. And when it's dark, it's cold, and when it's cold, the atoms don't move around much, and so gravity is able to draw the atoms together, and you get stars forming. So every star you see in the sky, including our own by day, we all began life at some point inside these dark dust clouds. So to see them helps illuminate for people where we've all come from. And of course, being that we are not in the center of the galaxy, our view of the galaxy changes over the course of a year. So in the summertime, you've got the wonders of Cygnus, Scorpius, you've got Sagittarius, these sites that lead you in towards the center of the galaxy. In wintertime, we go to the other side of the sun, and the part of the Milky Way that's up is out towards Taurus and Orion. One of the things I like to show folks with the photographs here is, here's a photo that I took of the winter Milky Way from Hawaii Volcanoes National Park in December. So we've got the winter Milky Way, we have Orion's belt, Sirius, Taurus right up here. So right about this part of the Milky Way, that's the anticenter, directly away from the center of the galaxy. And if you squint, you can probably pick out some of these dark dust lanes in there. But now, you wait 6 months, we go around the other side of the sun, using the exact same camera settings, the exact same lens. Take this photograph. Right? Summer Milky Way. That changing view really tells us about where we are in our galaxy. So not only can you learn where we've come from, but you learn where we are. And in between those two, you've got Cygnus. You've got the summer triangle, Deneb, Vega, Altair, and the Milky Way running right in between. And right in between that triangle, you've got where we're heading. That's the direction that we're all going as the sun goes around the galaxy. So you have where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. All of this on view if you can actually see the Milky Way. The other wonderful thing about the summer triangle, of course, is that it's usually one of the few things that people can see from their homes. So I tell people, all right, there's the summer triangle overhead, the Milky Way through it. Enjoy your view now. When you go home, take a look at it again and see what you're missing. And so it presents people with a direct, visceral example of just what they have lost when they go home. The other interesting thing about the summer triangle, and I like this because of Vega here, is it helps reinforce that astronomy is not something futuristic or alien to parks or to nature. It's something that's always been a part of it. When John Wesley Powell, on his first expedition down the Colorado River, was writing in his journal after one particularly hard day of rapids, he happened to write about how excited he was. He couldn't get to sleep. And when he looked up in the canyon, he saw these stars that appeared to hang as if they were on velvet that was draped across the canyon rims. And it was so vivid. It was as if the stars were billowing down into the canyon itself. And it took him a while to figure out what that bright star was that he was looking at. And well, it turned out it was in fact Vega. So it's a part of the history, a part of the history of exploration, and in fact it's part of the history of people, of humanity. As long as there have been people in these places, they have paid attention to the stars. Chaco Culture National Historical Park out in New Mexico. It's a small park, fairly isolated. There's no paved road to this park. One of the things that makes it a wonderful place to go to. You feel as if you are actually driving back into time as you find your way there. When you do get there, you find these great houses. There's about a dozen of these giant ruins, great houses built by what used to be called the Anasazi. Today we call them the ancestral Pueblo people, so the ancestors, the Hopi, the Acoma, and the Zuni. This is one of those, Casa Rinconada. It's a giant statue bin, kiva, 70 feet in diameter, almost a perfect circle. Two giant T-shaped doorways leading down into this kiva. I'm here set up with my camera in one of the doorways, looking directly across the kiva at the other doorway, and this time I've allowed the exposure to go on for a bit longer. It's about an hour and a half in this case. And so we see the stars rise and we see the stars set. And what, of course, is the one star that does not move? Polaris. And where is Polaris in relationship to the other doorway? Directly above it. So the main axis for this kiva is aligned with true north, with, right now, the North Star. These are 1,000 years old, so back when these were built, Polaris probably was not in this position. Well, it was not in this position. But you can align things with the true rotation axis, the true cardinal directions of the Earth, by other forms of astronomy. One, in particular, is by paying attention to the sun. The sun rises somewhere towards the east, sets somewhere towards the west. At its highest point, it's directly south. And so you put a stick in the ground, and when the shadow is at its shortest, it points northward. There's evidence that these folks did pay attention to the sun. This square window over here, on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the first rays of the rising sun shine in through that window. And you have these 27 niches, square indentations, but you've got a few special lower ones. And on the summer solstice, the first rays of that rising sun shine in through that window and put a square of light right onto one of those lower niches. A solar calendar, perhaps. On the other side of this little canyon, there's another window that seems to do something kind of similar on the winter solstice. Could be a coincidence, but then again, maybe not. And in fact, there are a number of things within this canyon that do seem to have astronomical links to true north, or the equinoxes, or the solstices. And it's not strange or hard to believe that people would pay attention to the stars. You mentioned things like this, or Stonehenge, or maybe the pyramids, and people get a little tingle in the spine, hairs in the back of your neck rise, and you think, ooh, aliens. All right. It doesn't take aliens, nor does it take strange otherworldly knowledge not available to us, to orient your structures with the stars. People living out in places like this that were always very harsh, not really inviting climates. If you were going to plant, if you were going to harvest, if you were going to draw people in, gather the flocks, you need to pay attention to the sky in order to survive. Well, we've made it very hard, of course, to pay attention to the sky. Here's a little movie that I made out there at Chaco. And what you can see on this not very nice night is actually the lights of the surrounding civilization. The rangers out at Chaco used to tell people that there was very little about the canyon that was still the same as what was there when the Chacoans 1,200 years ago were there. But one of the few things that had remained unchanged was the sky. They no longer tell people that. And you can see that from the lights of Gallup and Crown Point. Over here's Albuquerque, a couple hundred miles away. There's a coal mine that opened up about 13 years ago. And they, of course, light up the clouds. And here's a picture that probably everyone has seen, an image of our civilization from space. And when you think about it, here you have a a spacecraft with a camera, and it's capturing light that's illuminating that camera on the underside of the spacecraft. And it's kind of a beautiful picture in a lot of ways. When the black marble, as that's referred to, came out most recently, everyone oohed and awed about how beautiful it was. Of course, all of us were kind of disgusted at that. But you look at this, and the magnitude of the problem is even worse than this picture makes it believe, because all you are seeing right here are just the individual light bulbs. The individual light is traveling up to hit this spacecraft. But light pollution is more than just having a light bulb shining directly into your eyes. It is sky glow. It is that light traveling upwards to bounce off of the stuff that's in the sky. It bounces around. Some of it goes straight overhead. That light manages to make it through to light up those spacecraft. But the rest of it bounces around and comes back down to us. And we see it come into our eyes as a glow in the sky. This map right here is part of a map made by some Italian astronomers. Cinzano was the lead author on this. And they did calculations. They took those pinpoints of light that you saw from the previous mosaics and figured out how that light would shine outwards to illuminate the surroundings. And they've color-coded this to how dark is the zenith, the point directly overhead, given all the lights that you have around you. And so it goes through the rainbow from blacks, purples, blues, all the way up through red, and then white being the brightest. On top of that, we have the interstate freeway system, and in blue and in bright red, we have national parks, national recreation areas, national monuments, historic places. All right. And so what you see here is, here's the East Coast. Here is the light path of our dichotomous country. You can see here on the East Coast, pretty darn bright. But there are still some dark places. Maine, the little red dot next to the number 6 there, that's Acadia National Park. It's one of the reasons they've been so successful up there. It's awfully dark. Other places, central West Virginia, pretty darn dark. And from West Virginia downwards, pretty dark as well. In fact, you can see it close up here where we are. So we are somewhere here-ish. I'm asking you, you're going to have to help me. Okay. But that is actually pretty amazing for some place as settled as this is. Take a look, for instance. Actually, do I have it on here? Okay, so here we have Blue Ridge Parkway coming down to here, Shenandoah up towards DC, really dark bright. A good sort of rule of thumb for these pictures is that where you can see the Milky Way, even vaguely, is kind of in that transition from yellow to green, about where you can begin to see the Milky Way. So, okay, yeah, you can kind of see it up here in Shenandoah, but boy, to be able to get out to the blues, that's pretty amazing. The nation's #1 most visited national park is this one down here, next to #1. Great Smoky Mountains. When I was on my sabbatical, I traveled out to Great Smoky Mountains, and I was working with the rangers to come out and be able to learn about astronomy there. The first thing the rangers told me is, well, why are you coming here? You know, it's called Great Smoky Mountains, right? And I was absolutely clueless. I got out there, and in fact, I found that, no, they did have an astronomy program. It ended the week before I got there. The ranger ended completely unaware of it. It was the local astronomy club showing up. He didn't know. That has changed. Some other places that you might not be aware of here on the east side of the U.S. that are pretty darn dark. Anyone ever been up to Michigan? Up here? Tasky. Amazing.
Shout out.
Yeah.
The UP is fantastic.
Yeah, the Upper Peninsula is amazing. Yeah, you can see it right up here. You're in the purples. Even down here, the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, this little red smudge right up there is Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. I stopped off there back in May for the Kevin Lockhart Dallas meteor shower, that Boston meteor shower in May. Yeah. Didn't see a single meteor, but boy, the Milky Way was gorgeous from up there. Anyway, so there are dark places out here, and that is one of the important things I want to get across. Because when people think about where to go for dark skies, they normally think about the West Coast. I'll be showing the West Coast here in a little bit, that part beyond the light. By the way, actually, just out of curiosity, anybody know what the dividing line between the light half and the dark half of the country is? What was that?
I-35.
Oh, yeah, I-35. Geographically, what is it about the country that defines this? Okay, time zones, farms, okay. Prairie,
Mississippi?
oh, wait a second. Someone mentioned aquifer. Okay. East of this, rivers flow year-round. Streams are plentiful. West of this, water becomes much scarcer, much more seasonal. Right? It's water. People follow the water, farms follow the water, and light follows the people. That is what defines the light half, dark half of our country. Okay, so the National Park Service, they caught on to this fact that no matter how good of a job they might be doing in their park about not having a lot of lights, about staying nice and dark, not having a lot of development, especially out here on the East Coast, they are at the mercy of the communities around them. In fact, there's a couple rangers out west, one in Pinnacles National Monument that has since become a national park, the other at Death Valley. Round about the turn of this most recent century, they had noticed that over the course of just a few years, they could actually see the sky getting brighter with the naked eye. This happens to coincide with the big housing boom, .com and housing boom that was going on. So what they decided to do is, as sort of good technicians, let's build a camera system that will go out and actually measure this so we can quantify it. And they came up with this camera system that they put on a robotic go-to telescope mount that they could, on their laptop, they could pre-program it to photograph the entire sky. It takes about 50 camera pointings to completely photograph the entire hemisphere above the horizon. But it would happen in about 40 minutes. They photograph the entire sky, they could make these mosaics, and they could color code the average brightness, magnitudes per square arc second. And they've color coded, again, this rainbow from blacks and purples up through yellows and reds, to see just how dark the skies were and where sources of light pollution were coming from. So here's one of their darkest ones, Yellowstone National Park. This was actually done away from all the park visitors and lodges up in the northern part of the park. You can faintly see the glow of light here. Oh, I should point out, okay, so right in the middle, we have 180 degrees. So due south is straight here in the middle of all of these mosaics. The zenith is the point directly overhead. North will be here on the edges. 90 degrees, so east is right here, west is over here. So the glow that you're seeing is almost due west. It turns out to be West Yellowstone, the gateway community right outside the park. But you can easily see the Milky Way, the dark dust lanes. It looks pretty darn spectacular. Here's Chaco. So again, same orientation. The Milky Way, still awfully darn bright, but now you have those other outside communities that I was pointing out. Chaco was just recently awarded status as an international dark sky park. Big Cypress National Reserve down in Florida. All right, so this is down in the southwestern tip of the peninsula. You can still see the Milky Way, but now the gateway communities, the outside communities, are quite a bit more prominent. So 90 degrees, due east. That's Miami. Up here towards the northwest, Tampa, St. Petersburg. Oh, there's Andromeda. Channel Islands. These are the islands right outside of Los Angeles. No development at all on those islands. But yet, look at their skies. All right. Even the ocean is no longer a boundary. So Los Angeles, stand out here, you would hardly even see the sky, in part because the light is so bright, it prevents you from even becoming dark adapted. By comparison to Acadia National Park back here on the East Coast. So again, one of the things I really want to get across is that it's just not an east-west issue. There are dark places everywhere, as well as incredibly light-polluted places everywhere. And Great Smokies, finally. All right, so this is top Clingman's Dome. So once again, with a camera, yeah, you can make out the Milky Way. But we aren't cameras. Our eyes are not cameras. We are subject to the light we see. So to stand up there, you do not ever become fully dark adapted anymore because of the surrounding lights on the horizon. Yes?
Is that like Gatlinburg or Bryson City or what?
Probably Knoxville to the right there.
Let's see. So there's due north. So over here is, so there's due south. So this would be towards the extreme northwest. So yeah, what would that be?
Knoxville and Gatlinburg.
Yeah. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Pigeon Forge goes up there. Then over here to the east, so somewhere in here is going to be Asheville, maybe somewhere in there. Yeah. And so one of the things, well, I throw this in this picture of Moab and Arches National Park. It doesn't take an awful lot to have an effect. Out here in Arches, you've got a tiny little, relatively tiny town in Moab. But Moab had just recently put in a bunch of nice decorative lampposts, old-timey lampposts that throws light in every direction. To the point now where it lights up the rocks within the park. And it does that all night long, every single night of the year. So one of the things, again, that we talk with people about is that by day, the park is doing a great job preserving the landscape for the wildlife and the enjoyment of people. At night, natural night no longer falls in this park. The rocks are being directly illuminated by the cities around there. In fact, it's not just the cities. This glow over here turns out it's oil development. Oil wells, which have become a big business, especially in shale country over the last decade, have made some allowances to try to not impact the beauty of the landscape, but they only think about the daytime. They put a berm, at least out here, a berm around the oil wells. It looks great. We don't really notice them by day. The sun goes down, and suddenly it's like, where the heck are all these sources of light coming from? Oil development. And so here's those maps put together showing you the light half and the dark half of the country. What you see out here on the western half is that places like Grand Canyon, Capitol Reef, Lake Powell, Canyonlands are out here, Yellowstone up here, Big Bend down here. So some of the darkest places in the country happen to have really important, amazing national parks. But like the previous photo showed, how dark the zenith is isn't necessarily the best measure of how pristine a site may be. That's what this map is showing, is how dark the zenith is. Cinzano and others, in particular one of the park rangers, Dan Barisco, who was part of this night sky team that developed this camera, they are going back and they are making new models where you aren't just modeling how dark the zenith is, but now you're averaging over the entire hemisphere that's visible in the sky to come up with a different measure, a measure of how pristine the entire sky is. And what you have is this map. Slightly different colors, I'll grant you that. I got a preprint that they let me have here for this picture. But I want to impress with you, notice here you have very dark black, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-ish, big, dark, apparently pristine places. Now when you take a look at this, those pristine places become quite a bit smaller and fewer in number. All right, out here in southeastern Oregon, Big Bend right there is now being approached upon by towns around it, especially oil development. Up here in Montana and the Dakotas, we've lost quite a bit. And the Colorado Plateau, here in southern Utah, northern Arizona. This is perhaps one of the highest densities of national parks. And if you want a truly pristine view, you pretty much have to go right out into the middle of Lake Powell at this point. Give you an example. Grand Canyon is now down here in the glow. The glow from Las Vegas, the glow from Phoenix, and ever so slightly the glow from Flagstaff and a few other little towns contribute. Okay. Great Basin National Park over here in Nevada, and some dinosaurs. Here's arches, and there's the lights of Moab right there. Okay. So these pristine places have become fewer, which is one of the things that the Park Service is really interested in. Because as we go forward in this next century of the Park Service, they're interested in what role they can still play. Well, there's a group of Park Service folks, local businesses, communities, outfitters, that are banding together to form something called the Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative to say, hey, we have a vanishing resource right here that can be a source of tourism dollars. This will bring people to our area, not just by day, but by night as well. And when you have people coming by night, they need to find places to stay, and they need to stop at restaurants. They need to do all sorts of things that puts money into our communities. So there's this giant area encompassing 4 states that we're trying to get on board as to really do something serious about protecting this night sky. Recently, I've actually started working with river runners, river guides, who tell me, yeah, you know, those park rangers, they get visitors for maybe an hour or 2 for one night up there on Grand Canyon, but I get people for 2 weeks on the Colorado River. And there are no TVs down here. There are no bars for them to go to. There's nothing for them to do. And the number 1 question you get is about stars. The number 2 question you get are about birds. The stars are number 1. This can be a place to reach out to people. So unfortunately, this summer, I've got to spend 2 weeks rafting the Grand Canyon. I'm going to take along a 12-inch Dobsonian that I got.
We're in the full moon, right?
Yeah, right.
And we leave at 3rd quarter, and we get down to our takeout point in 1st quarter. So we get dark as it's going to be. All right. So one of the things that the Park Service has got is that they are monitoring light pollution. They're through their interpreters, through the Park Service, interpretive park rangers. They are now having many, many more night sky astronomy programs, actual pull-out monuments and markers about the sky. They've got a VIP astronomer program, volunteers in the parks. They've begun to advertise in places like Sky and Telescope to find retirees who have their own telescopes, who are very knowledgeable, who are good interpreters to the public, to come in and spend a few weeks or months in certain parks where there just doesn't happen to be a ranger who's knowledgeable about these things. So finding a way to get that knowledge base into a park. They're promoting the idea of international dark sky parks. At this point, there's something like about a half dozen dark sky parks just within the United States. It started with Natural Bridges. Now it's Death Valley, Big Bend, Chaco, Grand Canyon, Parashant have become international dark sky places. And they've become tourist attractions. And then lastly, trying to promote this Colorado Plateau Dark Sky Cooperative. And as I mentioned, we're coming to the centennial in 2016 for the National Park Service. The Park Service director put out a call to define what would be the priorities for the next 100 years. And on that list, they now have the Starry Sky Initiative, protecting night skies. That is now a Park Service priority. So all of this hopefully bodes well for the future, or at least mitigating the worst of what can happen. And I guess at this point, I probably shouldn't even put this in here. You guys all know what light pollution is. The light that goes down on the ground, that's helpful. The light that goes in the sky is bad, it bounces around, blots out the light of a poor star. whose light's been shining for a million years to get to us. And I don't know about you, but in communities that I've been dealing with, especially ones that are near national parks, a lot of these happen to be very historical little towns who like a very historical look to their towns. And so you find lampposts and things that look like this. And there's a lot of pushback from these communities. You know, economic times are tough, let's face it. Night sky is not a priority on those people's list of things to get them through the next business year. But when you point out that all that light that shines directly above the horizon does nothing useful to light up bats and spacecraft, and that wasted light is wasted electricity, which is wasted electricity dollars, which is wasted resources generating that electricity, then that begins to open some eyes. Furthermore, the light that's shining horizontally, that contributes to glare, that blinds people, that makes it harder to see things. Also, as it turns out, light that shines horizontally, computer models are now showing that is actually the most harmful light for sky glow. The light that shines directly straight up, or that shines down and then reflects straight up, that light, as it goes upwards, passes through the smallest path of our atmosphere. And so it mostly makes its way out to light up those spacecraft. The light that shines out horizontally, it has the longest path length to follow through our atmosphere, and so it scatters the most. So that 10% there that shines out horizontally is the most dangerous 10% for sky glow and for glare. The productive part of this lamp is that 40%, that only 40% shines downwards. So again, when we talk about local towns, economics, imagine if I could point out to you any other feature of your town where 60% of it is complete and utter waste. Wasted light, wasted electricity bill, wasted natural resources, carbon footprint, waste. A lot of our streetlights were put in right after World War II. Many of them are coming up now for renovation, replacement, especially with this LED technology. People are looking to put in new lights. Now is the time to put in new light fixtures. Yes?
Well, you know, LED lights are really efficient. Hopefully they don't make them in these historical shapes and shine everywhere.
All right, hold on a second, I got something for you. Okay. So, the first priority should be just to put shades on the tops of your lights. Prevent all that light from going upwards or sideways. Maybe go down. Further, if the inside of that shade is reflective, all that light that used to go up now goes down, so you get more light on the ground. And if you don't need more light, and frankly, you don't, you can put in lower wattage light bulbs. So you save electricity, save your electricity dollar, you save natural resources, and you get the sky, get the stars back. This can be a win-win situation for everybody. It's not stars versus safety. This is first priority. Second priority is with those LEDs. The new LEDs, especially the ones that were just awarded a Nobel Prize in Physics, put out a lot of blue-white light. And a lot of cities, New York City being one of them, are looking to change all of their lights with these. Unfortunately, they're bad. They're bad for night vision. A couple ways in which they're bad. One, they use a lot less energy to put out the same amount of light. But people are already used to paying a certain amount of electricity and putting a certain amount of electricity through these lampposts. So when they put in these LEDs, they're putting even more light out on the ground. Light bulbs have gotten a lot more energy efficient over the last 50 years, but instead of putting that into energy savings, we've put them into making brighter and brighter light bulbs for the same dollar amount. And so people call that being energy efficient. So LEDs are going to put out a lot more light unless we consciously make them not. The second thing is all that light is going out in the blue end of the spectrum. It's the part of the spectrum that our eyes are the most sensitive to at night. And so the glow they produce is going to have an even worse effect on our eyes and what we see. So this could be a very, very bad time coming up for us if we are not careful about asking people to put both shades and try to avoid the bluest, whitest of these LEDs. There are some that actually have coatings that do block out the very bluer end of that.
Well, I know for residential use, they've got some that put out a warmer white light.
Right. And that's the thing that we should be moving people towards. And tell you about the parks, it's these old timey light fixtures. The parks, as they've been renovating their lodges, have been replacing their light fixtures. Grand Canyon's doing a great job on this. Yellowstone did a great job on this. The lamppost here on the right is from the Lake Yellowstone Hotel. Unfortunately, they couldn't find any of these fixtures that matched what they already had, so they had to make them custom made. But what they've done is, instead of having a light bulb down here at the bottom that would shine upwards through glass, the light fixture, the light bulb, goes up here at the top, but they removed the glass, so all the light shines out and downwards. Very little of it gets reflected upwards. And you can easily do the same thing. These aren't LEDs, but you can easily do the same thing with LEDs. And I spoke to the landscape architect who was doing this, designing these. Turns out she couldn't care less about astronomy. She does care about being energy efficient, though. And so, hey, great sales point right there. Lake McDonald Lodge and some other places in Grand Canyon either had fixtures like this. You can even see they had one of these compact fluorescent light bulbs up there. Grand Canyon and Phantom Ranch are retrofitting to put light fixtures like this in. So there are things that can be done that don't have to turn your quaint town into some sort of Buck Rogers, George Jetson kind of environment. And if you go to places like Lowe's, last time I went to Lowe's, they had a bunch of really nice features. They weren't called night sky friendly, they were called good neighbor lights. Because the other thing that they do is they keep the light from shining into your neighbor's bedrooms. I hate that. Light trespass. So if you're interested, if for some reason you haven't already looked this up, the International Dark Sky Association, I used to be on their board of directors. They have a lot of information on their website about light fixtures, being a good night sky community, lighting ordinances, suggested things, how to work with your local Chamber of Commerce. There's lots of pamphlets over there about the effects of light, not just on we astronomers, but also on the wildlife, and also on the health effects for people at night. So there's wonderful information over there. There's even one that's got me on the cover. So anyway, find your stuff. It's out there. And the website is darksky.org. And it's working with the International Dark Sky Association and the national parks that this idea of international dark sky parks came up. This park right here is natural bridges. And back when the first measurements were made, there were no sources of artificial light at all. And you can tell right here just how different this looks from any of those other parks that we were seeing. If you've got a good eye, you might notice that there is something right here. Back in 2007, when Natural Bridges was declared the world's first international dark sky park, that source of light was not there. Over the last 7 years, there's been a big push to get electricity and lights out to the Navajo Reservation, such that almost every single little house out there now has a giant light bulb on it. And you talk to Navajo, and a lot of the folks that live in those houses are like, they have no idea where these lights came from. They just came out one day and put them up. So out here in the middle of this dark sky preserve, this is what's happening if people aren't careful. So this is something that takes continual vigilance in order to help preserve. But when you do go out to natural bridges, and you do stand out there under that natural bridge, and you look up, and with the exception of that one faint little glow, which at this point is hidden behind the rock, the only thing, the brightest thing, is our galaxy itself. That is a truly awe-inspiring moment. And if you think about it, we all had to travel up here to get to this dark sky location. This is a special place. It used to be you could see the Milky Way from anywhere, everywhere, every night that it was dark. It was so common, people took it for granted. Now we have made it so that you have to travel to see it. The parks are precious places. There's a reason why we preserve things like Grand Canyon or Yosemite or natural bridges. They have an obvious feature there that we can see. This is another feature, the Milky Way itself, that we have now lost most places. And so we need to treat it like any other natural resources, a thing to be cherished. So what I want to do is leave you with here is sort of my little last slideshow about the national parks, the way I see them when the sun goes down.
Could you not do that?
So back in the 1930s, there was this campaign, WPA, to get people to go out and see the beauty of preserving on the ground. And today we have a similar campaign to get people to go out and see the beauty of the parks preserved at night. I want to say thank you all for coming. I think we've got time for questions.
Questions, Jeff?
You bet.
So, speaking of the Grand Canyon National Park, there's fuss always about development. In discussions and things like that, what do the organizations take part in any part, or do you have a delegate that are involved in something?
Okay, so the question was about development the south rim. Are we involved in that? Yes, there's been involvement with the IDA. I've given them also a number of talks up there. It also helped that one of the fellow who's the quasi-mayor of the gateway town is also married to one of the park rangers who helped host me quite a bit when I was up there. So they are aware of it. If you take a look at the gateway town, they put in fully shielded lights. They put in more than we would have liked, but at least it is shielded. The folks that want to turn that town into a giant sort of gateway mecca, we're less happy about just because the sheer number of lights that are going to show up with that. Even if you do shield them, it's going to make things worse. And unfortunately, that gateway town is due south of the rim, so anytime you're up there and you want to see Sagittarius, you're going to be looking straight over the lights of this new development. So we aren't crazy about that. But other things that have gone on, the Grand Canyon Association, the nonprofit association that works with the park up there, they hired one by Laura Williams, who her job for the last 2 years or so has been to develop a catalog of every single light bulb on the south end of the Grand Canyon. Where it is, how often it's used, when it's on, what effect it has. Desert View Tower, for those that aren't aware, this big, wonderful Mary Coulter tower from the 1930s, perched right there on the south rim, had an enormous light on it. Actually had several, including lights that were kept on inside. So that the river guides, the river rafters, they'd spend like 5 days in beautiful solitude. They'd come around a bend, and here was this giant street light, they referred to it as. They'd come around, and suddenly there was this whopping bright light that was on at night that they could never turn off. Well, she got it turned off. And one of the things that she's doing is trying to find a way how a large organization like that can track, catalog, maintain a database of what their lights are so that they can help make them better. And that hopefully then other parks will be able to use this database technique for their own parks. So we're all trying to work together on this. Yes?
Aren't there some communities near certain observatories like Kitt Peak that make a lot of effort to control the lights?
Absolutely. The question is about communities, especially near observatories, that make a special effort. Flagstaff, Arizona is the first one. It's located an hour and a half south of Grand Canyon. Lowell Observatory, established back in the 1890s to look at Mars, is right downtown there on Mars Hill. The U.S. Naval Observatory, where I used to work, is also there in town. They've got a dark sky site south of town. They're also building, Lowell Observatory is building the new Discovery Channel telescope, a giant, it's a 4-meter F1 or something, crazy telescope, wide field telescope, south of town. So Flagstaff for about the last, I think at this point, 50, possibly 60 years, has had lighting ordinances to help protect these observatories. The very first lighting ordinance in the country was there, and it was designed to stop searchlights. Companies come in, car manufacturers, and they want to put searchlights out, and they got those stopped. And from that point, they now have restrictions on the total number of lumens, what kinds of shades you can have. And what the Park Service, the park rangers who did these mosaics, we had them come out, and in taking a look at one of the national monuments, Walnut Canyon, right outside Flagstaff, they were able to measure how bright the sky was due to Flagstaff. And from that and other satellite images, Flagstaff puts out as much light as a town 1/3 its size, based on these ordinances, which themselves had grandfathered in some even older fixtures there. So these things do work. Tucson is where the International Dark Sky Association got its start. Tucson has similar ordinances because of Kitt Peak. San Diego County, California had some due to Palomar. But they are under constant attack by local organizations who don't like the yellow sodium light that they put out, or who feel that they aren't properly being kept safe because the sky looks dark. So it's a continuous process of educating the public about how these things do not affect safety. It's just putting light where you want it, when you want it. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Another area of work, I think we would have some impact as to where you eliminate
Exactly. The question here is about how we do nighttime advertising, especially billboards. This is another area where we are embarked on a dangerous new trajectory. Most traditional billboards have a light bottom, they shine, hit the blackboard, the billboard, and then shine up in the sky. Kevin Poe, a ranger out of Bryce Canyon, has been fighting these billboard manufacturers because casinos in Las Vegas have been building billboards all along I-15 through Utah, going right by Bryce Canyon, and they can actually see the increased light. Billboard manufacturers are fighting this tooth and nail. They say if you put the lighting on top, we have to use a ladder to get up there to change the light bulbs. The other thing, though, is electronic billboards are being developed. There is a Kickstarter campaign by Fabio Falci. He's one of the Italians who worked with Cinzano on these night sky maps. There's a Kickstarter campaign for a coating that you can put on those electronic billboards that prevents the light from shining upwards. You get destructive interference when it tries to shine above the horizontal. Unfortunately, the Kickstarter campaign isn't doing all that well, so I invite folks to check it out. But you're right. Billboards aside, they're bad, but if you could at least find ways, even if it's not billboards, even if it's lighting up businesses and downtowns, to put those lights at the top so that they shine downwards and then into the ground, that will help tremendously. Just replacing, repositioning light bulbs. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Not an astronomer. I live here. And when we first moved here, it was the summer, and we were walking home from neighbor's house one day, and I said to my husband, look at this weird cloud. It just goes across the whole sky. So I've never seen the Milky Way aside from living here. And I guess my question is for you, since you've been everywhere, all these big grand parks, and here you come to the most awesome place to be, Halifax, how it kind of rates. Because, you know, we have like, we're blue, we're awesome, we're dark, but it's like, well, for a person or astronomer, like, how cool is it, like, when you look at it?
Okay. Fantastic question. So, okay, how does this look to the average general person? One of the nice things about those mosaics that the Park Service was doing, okay, they may be showing all sorts of crazy colors, but they took those mosaics in a filter design, it's a Johnson V filter designed to be right about where the human eye is the most responsive. So it really was kind of measuring what the person would actually see. But then again, our eyes, we aren't cameras. We can't just expose our eyes there for a long period of time. Last night, what I saw was amazing. I'd say that easily looked like what I might see out in parts of Joshua Tree where I am. The fact that you could go out, you didn't even have to be that dark adapted, and you could see the Milky Way going right overhead was pretty incredible. So I think this is great. This is, in fact, it might even be better than what I saw up in Acadia last month. So I think you guys have something special here. You really do. And you know, those maps where you saw the dark purple in West Virginia and then the blue going down here through Virginia, North Carolina, I've been asking people for a while, hey, anybody know what this is? Because I figured it must be a swamp or something. You know, why is nobody living there? Why are there no lights? So this is something to really be treasured and to advertise the heck out of. So I think it's great. Yes?
I think the important part of what you just said is that it's accessible. On the East Coast, if you look at, I mean, look how many thousands of miles you have to drive for the population to drive to.
Right.
Where here we have, you know, a potential real gem that just needs to be kept polished so that we can keep the light at bay. The masses are here; they're in a sense on the doorstep. But that's good because then we can help educate them a little bit more.
Exactly. You think about the reason why Great Smoky Mountains is the most visited national park is you look at all the cities that are around it. You've got a huge population living within an easy drive to come out for a day or potentially for a night. Same thing holds true right here. But you've got a vastly darker sky right here than what the folks at Great Smoky Mountains have. So I think you're absolutely right. This is something to really promote as an easy destination. You do not have to drive to northern Maine or southern Florida in order to see skies as good as what you have right here. Yes, sir.
Is there any coordination that goes on between the National Park Service and the local state parks as far as night sky preservation goes? No. No.
Local. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I visited Cherry Springs in Pennsylvania
Oh, yes.
a couple times, and it's interesting every time they release a new light pollution map, it gets brighter and brighter. It used to be like that gray shade,
Yeah.
it's dark blue, and then it's light blue. So I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, it's, well, there isn't much coordination.
Yeah.
And where I am on sabbatical right now up in central New York, there's no national parks there. It's state parks. And they're just struggling to keep the bathrooms open during the daytime. They actually close the parks at night. So I've been roused out by park police quite a few times. So it's one of these things where it's a resource if people know to take care of it. And if they do take care of it well enough, that you can do things like this and have it be open and available to the public. Yes.
Have you seen any studies or discussions about how actual pollution has affected, the scene? I mean, we noticed that when you go down to the Winter Star Party out in the Keys, you can see a difference, almost a magnitude difference about what you're seeing. And part of it, not just the dark sky, but there's no pollution out there.
Right. Yeah, so light pollution, or for light pollution, for that sky glow to work, is you need to have stuff in the atmosphere for the light to scatter off of. So the more humid it is, the smoggier it is, the dustier it is, the more stuff you've got in that atmosphere, the more it's going to scatter light, and the worse it's going to look. That is one advantage the Southwest, the Western U.S. does have, is that it's a lot drier there in general. So the clarity is a bit better. Pollution also seems to have another interaction with light pollution in that I was just reading about this the other day, but I'm not a chemist here, so thankfully you have one, that the nitrogen, oxygen molecules that make up smog in our atmosphere, they will break down under darkness, so they break down at night. But the brighter we make the night, the less they break down, and so the more they build up. And so it's possible that in the same way that smog makes light pollution worse, light pollution may make smog worse. So this may be a nasty cycle for really polluted places. Yes, sir.
I just never read, which scatters more, dust or humidity? I just never.
Okay, as a good scientist, I have to say I don't know. I might be able to do some sort of back the envelope calculations, but the first answer is I don't know. Other questions?
Well, I mean, we were always, when you're down in the Winter Star Party, you're surrounded by water, so clearly vapor seems to be what people think is a problem. But when you bring people from the West Coast, Western United States, and you say, listen, there's not a problem with moisture in the air now. So
It's, if you don't have the light scattering off it, hey, no, that's fine. Yeah. Anybody else? Plug for my book. I wrote for the last sabbatical here. What you just heard were parts of chapters 1 and 12, and it's available on Amazon for pretty cheap. I didn't bring it in. But if you do buy one, send me an email and I can sign a sticker